going into our next segment, we're going to talk about reviewing the tape. And with this portion, what I like to do with this part of the show, I like to go over what I've done over the past month and where I lost, where I won, and hopefully you can have some of these tips as key takeaways so you can avoid my mistakes and instead increase your pathway to success. But this is a safe place here, safe space, and I like to share my learning experiences. So I would say one of my first learning experiences, and I would say this is a loss and a win, both at the same time, because I went into this earlier in the show, that my first show, solo hosting, I was very nervous, and I know that you could tell in my voice. Hopefully, this time around, I sound a little bit more lively. I sound a little bit more like myself, and I feel like myself with this show too. And I feel like I got there with the last show, but this was the first time in a long time that I was like, oh my God, today I get to put together a show plan. I get to put together show notes, because back when I did a Tuesday night radio show, my whole Monday was filled with just finding cool stories and, what my unique angle would be on these cool stories, what I think my co-hosts would say about them, and, my counterpoint to what I think they would say. So it was one of those situations where today I sat down on the computer, well, actually yesterday I sat down on the computer to start mapping out what this show plan was going to be. And I was excited. And it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, I'm going to record another show. And I take a great pride in putting together a good show, and, all the links that are needed to turn, because my sort of content process is that I record the long form content, but I take the show notes first. So I do my research, I read everything, I save the interesting stories, and then from there, I would say probably my biggest challenge is to figure out how to cut the show down, because honestly, I want to talk about 40 different things. And I think this also comes with just not maybe doing shows for a while. So this is one of those things where I'm like, I just want to talk about everything and I have an opinion on everything. But for my sake and your sake, I try to cut it down into that I would say my biggest challenge and probably my biggest L right now is to cut out the topics that probably don't make sense for the overall theme of the show. So I did take out a couple stories that I wanted to include, but maybe I'll include them in the future. But that, I would say, putting together show notes is something that was a really big win for me this week, after I think I took a little bit of an L on my first show, just because, I'm still feeling this out. It's a new thing for me, but I'm hoping with every show and with your guys' help, I can get a little bit better. I can make it more interactive. You heard some audio clips earlier. So I'm hoping that will help break up hearing my voice over and over again for, 30, 45 minutes. So thank you guys for hanging with me on the first one. That was definitely a big learning experience. But it was also a learning experience because I posted that show the night before we had our third quarter podcasters meetup here in the North Florida area. And we had close to 50 people show up for this meeting. And I'll have a full video recap and takeaways for that in a separate show that'll be posted up on bonjourwithblythe.com. But I just want to give a quick shout out to the Buzzsprout team for hosting us, because I consider that meetup a big win for us. It was one of those situations where we had podcasters that have been with us since the very first meetup, when it's just in, like a local dive bar. And here we are at the beautiful offices of Buzzsprout, which if you don't have a podcast host, or you're looking for a host, or if you're looking to transfer, they're not paying me to say this, but you should absolutely go and check them out, buzzsprout.com, because I have been with them for years. I love that you can push out all your show to all of these different platforms: Spotify, iHeart, Stitcher, iTunes, of course, Google Play Studio, basically any kind of podcast reader that's out there. Buzzsprout will point your show to those different platforms. And then it's really affordable plans, and they also have some really cool things in the works, one of which is it's a better advertising experience, because with, you know, the numbers that I mentioned earlier in the show about how many ad dollars are being spent, the majority, I would say close to 50% from that study of those ad dollars that are being spent, they're being spent on those annoying ads that are auto injected into a podcast. So if you ever notice, if you're just in the middle of your, you know, you've set up a good groove, you got a nice podcast on, and then all of a sudden like a Geico ad comes on, and it's like, what the hell? I'm trying to enjoy a show, and then all of a sudden an ad comes in and slaps you out of nowhere. It's a bad it's a bad listener experience, I should say. And those ads don't perform well for it's annoying to your audience. I think it's lazy. I can't stand them. I think it's a terrible listening experience. So, but Buzzsprout, going back to my original point, Buzzsprout is working on a program that they're going to be releasing soon that will be able to connect podcasters with advertisers so that they can do what's called a live read. And a live read is one of those advertisements where I could be talking, you know, just as normally right now. And then at the end of this segment, what I would do is, hey, I want to tell you a little bit about this mattress company. You know, this mattress company and Geico are probably the most commercials that I hear on a regular basis. But if you're doing a live read, that's a situation where you can broker a deal with an advertiser that makes the most sense for you, makes the most sense for your show, and it doesn't annoy your listener, and it's more likely, it has a better conversion rate. So Buzzsprout is taking steps in those directions where they're putting the podcaster and the content creator first. And when you put the creator first, especially the creators that put their audience first, then the advertisers that will follow those shows and those people make for a better user experience all around. It's more, the ad dollars are spent more wisely. The user isn't annoyed and immediately switches to the next podcast because they're tired of your stupid commercial. It's one of those situations where it's a better situation for all parties involved. So Buzzsprout as a whole is a great company if you're looking for a hosting provider. But we had our meetup there, and it was really cool to see all of the shows, especially at the local level. I didn't know so many podcasters were known in Jacksonville, but it's really cool to see and to network. So I would, if you're not located in the Jacksonville area, I would see about, you know, finding a local group in your area, because it really is one of those situations where a lot of the times as content creators, especially as podcasters, we're sort of we feel like we're on an island by ourselves, and we're doing a show by ourselves. But when you can meet up with other like-minded people who are facing the same challenges and want to have the same aspirations as you do, it's really it's almost like a creative kick in the ass that you need. It was definitely for me, because I pushed to release my first episode the night before, and I think I needed that event in order to push me to make that episode, because without that event, I'm not putting out my first episode a couple weeks ago, and then I'm not sitting right here and making my second episode that's just, you know, a little bit better. And it's a little bit better because I got to meet up with other like-minded people. Another situation where I would consider this a win, but it could have been a big loss. Now, this HiveCon is, if you listen to the last show, it's a group of local content creators / influencers who are primarily focused on, I would say, Instagram. And what they did with this event is they had brands come together, people who worked at marketing agencies, and some of the top content creators in the North Florida area. They all came together. I would say there's probably about 50 of us that were there, but I was invited to speak. But I thought this was going to be a situation where I was speaking in front, you know, holding a mic, speaking in front of, you know, seated people, a traditional speech, you know. So I prepped all weekend for this speech, and then I show up, and it's pretty clear that that's not going to be, you know, the lay of the land for this particular event. And I almost had like a mild panic attack, because I practiced this speech all weekend. I wrote the speech the week before. I was missing a Jaguar game for this event. So it was one of those things like, this better be worth it. And for that situation in particular, what I learned is sometimes you just gotta wing it. And because when I showed up and it was obvious that there wasn't going to be a ton of people in my little, I guess, speech, I would call it a breakaway session. And I had about a half a dozen people that did end up showing up because these are people who likely already have a website and they're just looking for reasons to, and I don't want to say they're just looking for reasons to upgrade it, but they already have a website and they're probably confused on the next steps to take. So for me personally, knowing that I practice a speech, I kind of just threw it all out the window and sat down at a table and had, face-to-face conversations with everyone that was there. And that was one of the more rewarding experiences that I've had in a while, because I was able to look at other female business owners and to be able to have a conversation with them and help strategize with them and help them to know that they're talking to somebody who's been in the trenches. I have a major gripe towards a lot of business coaches and, motivational speakers and things like that, especially the ones that have never been in the trenches. I firmly believe that you can't coach me on something if you've never been in the trenches. Don't sell me some kind of guide, some kind of e-course if you haven't done it yourself. And so for me to flip the script and be able to look at somebody else and tell them, this is how I did it, and this is how you can do it too, or this is how I would do it if I was you, that was such a rewarding experience, because I didn't even need the damn notes. I didn't need a speech for that, to have a consultation essentially with these 6 women that joined me. So I think it's sort of it goes back to a lesson learned, and the show notes that I mentioned earlier, that you can prepare until your eyes bleed, but sometimes you gotta be able to wing it. But the fact that you prepared that much is going to show in the tape.